Welcome back to Your Dialysis Nurse. This is part 2 of what's the real agenda behind more and more patients being asked to dialyze at home. Now, first things first, I'm not knocking the patients that are dialyzing at home. My father was one of those patients that started off doing dialysis at home at one point. And it does promote better health outcomes when you are dialyzing at home. So there's nothing against patients dialyzing at home. My thing is, what's the agenda behind it, right? Now, if you watched part 1, we talked about how there is a shortage of healthcare workers, and that's only going to increase year by year, right? So, what do we do? And what are they doing to combat the shortage of healthcare workers out there? Now, one of the things that dialysis units are doing is they introduced another modality, that modality being HHD, home hemodialysis. Now, with home hemodialysis, you are taught to do your own dialysis at home. You do have a nurse that's on call 24/7, and you do have other things put in place. Like if you're with Fresenius, you have an on-call number for Fresenius. If you're with DaVita, you have an on-call number for DaVita, for Liberty, for U.S. Renal Care, and all other dialysis units out there that are introducing home hemodialysis. Opposed to a few years back when it was only the Fresenius Next Stage machine where you could dialyze at home. There are other machines that are being introduced that you can use at home, right? So this is one of the ways that in the dialysis world, they're combating the shortage of healthcare workers. Now, I did have to sit down and talk with the End-Stage Renal Disease Network at one point because there was an incident where, let me start from the beginning. My mother called me one Saturday morning and she said, why is your father only at dialysis for 45 minutes? So I looked on the map and I did see that he was only there for 45 minutes. I called him. I asked what happened and he said the dialysis unit never opened up. There was about 3 of us standing outside and they just never opened up. I guess the workers called out for today. They didn't have enough staff. So I did make a few calls, one of them being the End-Stage Renal Disease Network. And that was only because I couldn't reach anybody from that unit. There was no other number for me to call. I couldn't reach the manager. And the only thing that was left for me to do is call the End-Stage Renal Disease Network and also report it to the DaVita hotline. So let's fast forward to over the weekend. My dad did have to watch his fluids because now he was going more than 3 days without dialysis, which nobody should have to endure because of a shortage of workers. You know what I mean? Like there has to be other things put in place for situations like that. Now, not knocking that unit because there was something put in place. It's just that there was a new manager who called me that Monday morning and she let me know the situation. She wasn't aware that the patient list was not updated by the previous manager. So my dad and a few other people were overlooked when it came to rerouting them to other dialysis units because there was a nurse call out. Now, I was under the impression that the manager that called me was not a nurse. And long story short, I later found out because she started working the floor that she indeed was a nurse and she did not cover that unit. Maybe she had 2 other units and she had to cover those units. I don't know what the story was, but as a manager, when you are a nurse and your nurse calls out, you have to come in and you have to cover the floor. The patients have no other options. It's not like they can go to McDonald's and decide to get dialysis for the day instead of a Happy Meal, right? So I'm digressing, and let's stay on topic. So, the manager, she did reach out to me. Unfortunately, I had made the phone calls that was necessary to make prior to her talking to me. I'm really down to business when it comes to my family, and making sure I advocate for them just like I would advocate for my patients at work, right? So she did talk to me. Unfortunately, calls were made that needed to be made. And when the End Stage Renal Disease Network called me, which is for patients, they did inform me, because I had to call them other times as well, that the patient has to talk to them, right? And I said, I understand that. I said, but I just spoke with the manager, and she did tell me that it was something that could have been prevented. She was apologetic for it. She did offer my father, another chair time on a different day, but he is very used to his routine, and he's used to doing his Tuesday, Thursday, Saturdays. So, as far as sticking to that schedule, it's in my father's best interest that they work as hard as they can to stick to that schedule, because he has other doctor visits and other issues that he has to attend to on the days that he's not doing dialysis. And some dialysis patients don't just sit at home and wait for the dialysis unit to call them, right? So when I was talking with the End Stage Renal Disease Network, the employee that I was talking to for that specific area, she did tell me that she was glad that I was able to talk to somebody, and there is a shortage everywhere when it comes to dialysis units. And this is why they're now introducing HHD, and they're pushing for HHD. And when this representative told me that, that really made my heart sink. It's like, how do we have such a shortage of healthcare workers? All these people in the world, and we have a shortage of healthcare workers. Not only do we have a shortage of healthcare workers, we have healthcare workers that are in the field that are leaving because inflation is happening, which is going to happen no matter what. There's no way to stop it. When inflation happens, like, people also need to get paid more. There is more pressure for more healthcare workers to take more in an assignment, deal with more in a company, and still get paid the same rate that they're currently getting paid, and only accept their annual raise, right? And, companies that I have worked for are very guilty of that. And it shouldn't be that we should have to leave a company in order to fulfill our needs financially. Our pay, if we're only depending on our annual raises, it goes up, what, 30, 40 cents, maybe a dollar in some cases, maybe a dollar and 15 cents in some cases, $1.50 in some cases. Companies are not willing to pay what they need to pay for people that are willing to take on more responsibility, right? And that's something that I'm always preaching to any company that I go to. You got people, like, for instance, like me. I've been in the dialysis field for over 10 years. And I know how to do in-center hemodialysis. I know how to do home hemodialysis. I know how to do peritoneal dialysis. And, you know, people like that you want to keep around, because there's not a lot of people right now that have mastered the dialysis field. And when you have those people working for you in your company, when you have that employee that knows how to run the floor, knows how to manage the floor, it's a big difference for management, right? Because now that's one thing you really don't have to worry about. That person knows the ins and outs of what to do throughout the day. They know how to keep the patient stable. It's a big difference from having a whole bunch of new people in a facility opposed to having two or three people who know exactly what they're doing. And some of those clinics are feeling they're feeling the remnants of that. There are a lot of, I'm not going to say a lot of companies, but There's a company that's been around for a very long time, and their turnover is like this. And the patients feel that. So when they come to a clinic where there's nothing but experienced people there running the unit, they feel that difference. They feel that sense of secureness and relaxation that they can have knowing that they are in good hands, and it's people there that want to be there, that want to work, that actually love what they do. I guess what I'm trying to say is that there's less value being placed on nurses who have been in a certain field for a long time, who actually have a passion for what they do and love what they do. There should be more of a value there when it comes to those nurses. According to healthleadersmedia.com, facilities all around the world are facing shortages when it comes to the nurses and when it comes to the technicians. Companies need to value their workers that want to be here. If companies don't start valuing their workers, you're going to see even a greater shortage of healthcare workers. How do we avoid that? It's scary to think about. It's scary to know that even though we are feeling this shortage now, it is going to be greater in the next few years to come. It's scary. I want to say thank you for tuning in to Your Dialysis Nurse. And if you have any questions or comments, drop it below. Don't forget to subscribe and like my video if you enjoyed this conversation. And if you have any questions, let's talk about it.